How would our response to COVID-19 have been different if social media didn't exist? It's a hypothetical question. It's an interesting thought experiment to put out there. It's a question I've seen a lot of people pose, rather ironically, on social media. I've heard people ask that question. And it's an interesting one to take a look at. Because would we have had a more measured response, a less manic response, where every second we're continually looking at every little data point and obsessing over this and that, and then sides develop. It becomes a sort of debate, a classic online culture war. Those things have certainly happened in recent months, in the past year and a half with COVID-19. If we didn't have social media, would all of those facets of response to the pandemic been different? I think back to when SARS happened in 2003 in Toronto. It happened in other places around the world, but Toronto was one of the places where it was most acutely felt. And of course, to put the disclaimer out there, two very different viruses in many different respects. But I do remember what it was like then, and I remember not actually knowing all that much about it. It not really being a thing that many people were talking about in their day-to-day lives. I was in university at the time, and there was no social media, and I read the newspapers, and I guess I watched the TV news a bit. I was busy doing other stuff, though. I wasn't always looking at the newspapers. I wasn't always watching the TV news, and it was something that was very much in the background. Now, of course, that was a virus that was not spreading more broadly out of the hospital system than what they were acutely dealing with. Healthcare workers, though, they were very panicked about it. They were very stressed about it, and back when COVID-19 first broke in January, February, March of 2020, I had doctors on my SiriusXM show talking about being on the front lines for SARS, all the concerns they had, how those concerns were now returning. And we certainly felt their anxieties out in the news, out on social media, rightly so, because we wanted to learn from people who had been on the front lines during a previous outbreak. But it was interesting that those concerns weren't as amplified back 20 years ago. Of course, different situation, but it still just makes me wonder if there had been social media during the time of SARS, would there have also been a different response to that, a different sort of tone? Because for most people in Toronto, I think one of the main responses to SARS was that there was this SARS concert and you got to get a ticket to the Rolling Stones for $20. And I don't say that to be insensitive to those people who did die of SARS back in Toronto 20 years ago, but that was actually sort of most people's memory of what happened back then, a very different situation. And I think one of the things maybe we can take away on looking at that question of how would things be different with social media is maybe now we should also kind of temper how we respond to a lot of the social media mania out there. A reminder that social media is not real life, that there are concerns up there that some government decisions are being made more to appease voices that disproportionately speak to the social media mob as opposed to be more reflective of what the actual evidence that they're slowly and cautiously corralling tells them to do. Anyway, interesting question. How would things have been different? We'll never know, but well, we can always wonder.